this team is going after big brands, so creator brands, and then consumers. So their ability to create a brand and tell a story is really important.
All right, next up we have a company called Other, OTHR. Take us away.
Awesome, let's take a look. Everyone consumes content. We're here to fund its creators. Okay, creator economy platform. Other is a mobile app where creators can raise capital directly from their fans. Okay, so like a WeFunder for the creator space. Curious already what kind of creators, but let's continue. The traction is impressive. We have been creators, taken companies public and built products, some very impressive logos. I mean, the slides are really tight. I'm impressed. Did you work on this one, Alex?
No, I did not. I think this team's got a good eye.
Yeah. What we have seen in this scene, the creator market is growing rapidly, but funding options lag behind. I think this goes back to understanding what types of creators are having issues, because I would imagine like Mr. Beast probably does not have issues raising money. Totally. So if they're going after the long tail of the market instead, how does that sort of make economic sense? But let's continue.
Totally.
Creators need funding to scale, going from 0 to 100,000 fans. Okay. Going from 0 to 100,000 fans is relatively straightforward. Breaking past that is not. Okay. Interesting. So that's like the key blocker. I wonder if that means that the 100K plus fans is what's like squarely in their sweet spot, but would love that to be more clear.
Totally.
Okay, perfect. They answer the question on the next slide. A creator with 100,000 fans can easily tap into their community to raise capital. And they enable that. Great. The secret sauce: returns, trust, and reach. So transparently, I don't know enough about who else is in this space and what has and hasn't worked to have a strong opinion on this slide. I am surprised to see Web3 pop up. I don't think we've seen Web3 yet.
Well, I think it's the kind of anti-Web3 here, where they're saying that Web3 products have tried, but are frequently confusing and deceptive. So I assume that they're actually not using Web3 in this product. I think this is where competitors zigged, where they're zagging type slide, which I think is actually pretty good timing, because when you first saw like the intro slide, I think you immediately compared it to WeFunder, clearly identifying that maybe you don't know the market so super well, but you know that there are crowdfunding platforms that are out there that probably have tried this. And so it's interesting to really kind of make that competitive slide kind of early in my mind.
Yeah, I just would want to dig more into what does badly structured mean in terms of that creating low returns for users. And I sort of believe that any of these investment platforms, like, users have to be willing to lose their money to make the investment. So I kind of debate the validity of that, but let's continue.
Totally.
Our process has been tested and streamlined. We're capable of launching creators 2x faster and at half the cost of the market standard. Okay. Cost probably matters. Don't generally love when companies compete just on cost. And then speed. Okay. Interesting. The trading liquidity is especially interesting. I do wonder, since this is a two-sided marketplace, what kind of scale they need to get to, not just across the entire marketplace, but within any one creator, how many fans would they need to have on the platform to achieve that sort of liquidity? I think that's one of the challenges often with these sorts of investment platforms. It's like one, customer acquisition for the platform, and then two, create getting enough customers on board to create liquidity. And I would imagine that a Mr. Beast fan may not want to invest in Justin Bieber and vice versa. So if they get to 100,000 or a million users, but they have 1,000 creators, it may actually be hard to make the liquidity work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I think in theory, and we will get to it, but in theory, because you're going direct to creators, they can use maybe their audiences to bring their fans to invest in them. But it's interesting to think about the fact that just because you acquire that customer through a direct creator doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be on the platform to invest in other creators. I think it's like that one-to-one relationship may not be viable across the other creators you bring on the platform.
Totally. And then I think too, it's like, is raising funding the most important thing? Like one of the things we see as VCs is that we send out this like quarterly founder survey to get info from our portfolio companies on where their biggest focus areas are. And so often they tell us that they want help with fundraising, but when we actually like peel back layers, it's more around customer acquisition. We have a company called Ribbit.app that focuses on helping creators manage their customers, specifically musicians, and engage them and help drive more revenue. So I'd be curious where this sort of fits in the stack and if this is the most important thing, because that's the other challenge around, yeah, maybe they can bring their fan base on, but they're probably trying to bring their fans onto multiple platforms. So where does this sort of fall priority-wise?
Yeah. Really, really thoughtful. Yeah.
Investing made simple. We built an app for the novice investor, a little piece of everything, browse, analyze, buy. Cool. So this could be appealing to someone who hasn't done any investing. Love that from an educational standpoint. Let's continue. We attract creators. Creators attract fans. Okay, so you nailed that, Alex, and predicted their model.
I would hope that there was a slide in this deck that covered that. I'm glad it did.
Yes. And then they talk about the business model a bit too, which is helpful.
So it looks like 2% of transactions as well as 10% of the AUM on annual trading fees. So there's two bites of the apple.
Mm-hmm. A $10 billion market opportunity. Creators are just beginning to build brands. Growth ahead is exponential. Okay. I do think there are other players in this space, so that's a big question, but continue.
Totally.
Our 0 to 1 is musicians, and they have a clear reason why, which is great. I'd love to see an even more specific focus. So is it the music artists with 100,000 to 500,000 followers? And then what is their sort of unfair advantage? Is it because they have the connections in the industry? I think I saw Steve Aoki on another slide.
Yeah, that somebody worked for him or something. That definitely jumped out.
Okay, they're raising
Great
a pre-seed.
Slide. Cool.
What a clean deck.
Super clean deck. I definitely this stood out to me. I'm curious. Before we get into the content, I'm curious. Like, there's a lot said around how a design may or may not impact the impression of a deck. I'm curious, just like generally, did this impact you in any specific way or give you any additional kind of like insights into the team that would be meaningful on your decision?
Yes, it's a good question. So broadly, design is not that important at the stage that we invest. It really is more about the problem they're going after and their ability to win in the market they're serving. That said, this team is going after big brands, so creator brands, and then consumers. So their ability to create a brand and tell a story is really important. So it does matter, I think, for the space they're building in. And they were very intentional. I loved that as I had questions or you had feedback, that was almost the next slide. So I felt like it was both designed very well visually, as well as the flow and sequence was really thoughtful. And that does make a difference.
Totally. It's like that intuitive difference, but I think that insight in, if what your company is really requires you to market effectively in this creator space or the consumer space, then you need to kind of show that you have that taste in the design of your pitch deck, especially at the early stages. So I think that, it depends on the company. Maybe CT's tracker didn't need it as much, but I think something like this definitely benefits from great design. What's your high level takeaways? What do you like? What questions still linger?
Yeah, I think, I like that they already have traction. It seems like they have something in market, and that's really impressive. It seems like they've done some good research around the problem space and then have some lived experience from building in this space before. My main concerns are the competitive landscape and just what we've seen in other investment marketplaces. So whether it's art or investing in companies. I think a lot of these platforms are able to get to a certain level of scale, and then so they sort of plateau. I do think the angle of going after creators fans is interesting, but you'd have to convince me that this is the most important tool in a creator's toolkit, and they'll be able to attract a lot of fans. I would want to know more about the anticipated conversion rate of fans
Yeah.
once a creator kind of shares it, and then what that means for their ICP, and then how big the capital needs really are. Because again, I would imagine that many of the best rising creators actually can get capital
Yeah.
from other sources, right? The sort of bigger checks. And I know it's great incentive alignment, so I like it. I do question sort of the venture scale
Yeah.
aspect, but
I think that's a great point because the thing that jumped out to me is like, in theory, I think it all makes sense. I do want to know that capital that creators at that 100K mark really do need capital to scale their businesses and aren't able to monetize at the 100K mark or monetize enough to scale as fast as they want. And obviously, these two examples are good, but they're like the creme de la creme. You know, everyone knows Mr. Beast, everyone knows Justin Bieber. Maybe these sponsorships or the few $100,000s that they were able to get at the earliest stages did help. But I'm curious to just know about the market for funding in the creator space. Like, is this being done manually? Are they creators actually raising capital? I'm not so sure. If it is, and they could be bringing in their fans to that to have that incentive alignment, then I think that makes a stronger case for it. But I think that understanding how important capital is to the success of a creator is key to this for sure.
yeah, well, if we think about their business model, and to your point, they want to take two bites of the apple with their business model and the way they take transaction fees and AUM fees. If they could make a compelling case around having some really phenomenal top tier creators on the platform, and then just do the math, like we have, this creator has 30 million fans, even if only 1% of them convert, that's enough to represent, you know, all the revenue we'd need to get to our next funding milestone, for example. So I think there's just a little more math they could do to really highlight the opportunity. And if they had some of those creators signed, it may make it more compelling too.
100%. I think yeah, the traction feels a little bit like it's hanging, where it's like, wow, what does 20 million in GMV mean? Who are these creators? Can I look them up and see what they're doing? And the numbers on how impactful this funding has been for them would certainly be helpful, for sure.
Yep.
What's your final take on Other? Would you want to learn more? Are you more hesitant? What's your gut reaction here?
Yeah, I mean, this is one where I'm really grateful that we have a large portfolio of founders that we can lean on. This is one where I'd want to reach out to someone with expertise in market to get a sense of exactly what you said, like how big is the need for raising capital? Where does this fall in terms of priority? What else have you seen that's out there? To get a sense of whether this is a high enough pain point to make sense leaning further into. Otherwise, we tend to stay away from more consumer focused companies.
Totally makes a ton of sense. All right, good stuff.